A question that I had from one of the pastors who uh, has a real issue with the channel. He the question he wants for you to explain the composition of the Jesus character, because from his teaching, he teaches a very literal. This is a literal person. This is a literal story, including all the walking water and all the miracles. He sees it as a very literal composition of this character. How would you, given the similarities with the Homeric epics, how do you explain this Jesus character?
Okay, what I would like to do with this friend is to sit down and read through the Gospel of Luke, let's say, and omit everything that I would consider mythological. Okay, let's just get rid of all of that. And then let's see what's left. And what's left is coming from a very different social location. Its orientation is not to the Greek poetry, it's to the Hebrew Bible. Its orientation is to understanding Jewish law and Jewish tradition and being competitive with the Pharisees and to some extent chief priests and so on. That material doesn't necessarily come exactly from Jesus. In fact, I'm very much a skeptic. I'm not sure we know anything for sure that Jesus said. I think we can be sure about what kind of Judaism the author of the Q document thought Jesus represented. And I think that that image is largely correct. Namely, that Jesus was a law-abiding Jew. And in the Q document, those who obey the commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But then he goes on to say, and those who do not obey all of the laws will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but they're still in the kingdom of heaven. That is, the only law that needs to be obeyed is the love commandment, to love the Lord your God, and your neighbor as yourself. If you do that, you shall live. That's the primary message, apparently, of the Q document. So Jesus was, if you will, a social revolutionary inside of Judaism to make Jewish law not beholden to wealthy Pharisees and the cultural manufacturers, but to everyone. And this is why Jesus says in the Q document, I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. The law and the prophets were until John. After that, it's the kingdom of God. What's the kingdom of God about? Be compassionate as your Father is compassionate. So I think Jesus died because he was challenging the hard-nosed interpretation of Jewish law that represented by Pharisees and people who are called lawyers of the law, the nomikoi, and so on. So I think Jesus is an admirable martyr for the poor and the outsider and those who are not in control of Jewish law and so on. So that would be my response.
So would you say that this was a real character, and as per your book, he was mythologized? So there were mythological attributes from, example, Homer, that was attributed to this character?
Yes, and I think that's a good way to put it. I would put it this way. If you have a social reformer, let's say like Martin King Jr., and he dies a relatively young man, a violent death, and because the dominant culture is not happy with the way he's causing turmoil among African Americans, how are you going to remember him? Are you going to remember him as a martyr? Or are you going to remember his great exploits, his wonderful speeches, his ability to to organize and to get things going. Well, in the Greco-Roman world, one of the ways that you have heroes, and I think Jesus was a hero to his followers, is to mythologize him so that he's competitive in the religious workplace. So this is a way of making Jesus the loser, that is the powerless one who dies on a cross, into a divine agent. And you use narrative and mythology to talk about how God has used Jesus to represent a different way of being in the world.